So considering I seem to be doing a lot of big movies recently with regards to a lot of these reviews, you might be wondering why it is that I've decided to pick this film to review next. I do have my reasons for it, and they might not necessarily be what it is that you expect. Stick around and I'll tell you. Hello guys and welcome back to Rewind Reviews. Today we're going to be jumping on our machines to travel all the way back to 1982 to take a look at Timerider, The Adventure of Lyle Swann. Co-written by Michael Nesmith, alongside writer and director William Deere, Timerider sees a maverick motorbike racer wandering into a top-secret time travel research test site which unintentionally teleports him back to the mid-1800s, where he ends up having to fight violent outlaws for his survival. The movie stars Fred Ward, Belinda Bauer, Peter Coyote, Richard Masur, Tracy Walter, Ed Lauter and LQ Jones. So yes, Timerider. It's not exactly a big movie, it's not really a movie that a lot of people really sort of know about, but it is a movie that I did want to do a review for because this is something that I was kind of curious about when I first heard that this movie existed, for two reasons. The first reason being that I'm looking for movies that I haven't seen before, and this is one of the ones that I did do a bit of research on last year when I was looking up films to do in 2023. But the other reason is when I was looking up this movie and when I found out about it, the thing that initially drew me into it was the name. And this isn't me just going like, oh that sounds really cool. I'm actually quite familiar with the title of this movie from something else altogether. But I need to take you back all the way to when this started for me, and that is in 2012. I was in high school, and one of the things that some of our teachers had tried doing was setting up a book club, because we didn't really have a lot of things like that going on in our school. And one of the things that they wanted to try doing was sort of do like a bit of a test run. So they picked a few students to take part in this, and I was one of them. Long story short, it only lasted 3 weeks. My amazing PowerPoint presentation went to waste. And what they did was they arranged a trip for us to travel to Waterstones, which is a bookstore in the UK. So we got to get out of school a bit earlier. And when we got there, we went in, we basically just told to go have a look around, just to go and pick any book that we wanted to read. And everyone had gone scattered away all across the shop, and there's people like picking up Dan Brown books and things like that. But I was looking around and I was trying to get some ideas for what sort of stuff that I could potentially read, and I didn't want to pick something that I'd seen movies for. I wanted to pick something that I was completely new to, that I had absolutely no knowledge of whatsoever. So I drifted over into the young adult section, where I think they had things like Hunger Games and Maze Runner and like Artemis Fowl and things like that. And even though I was actually quite curious about the Artemis Fowl books, because we always had posters for them scattered all over the classrooms, I ended up having a look up at the top shelf, and there was 3 books all lined up back to back. And the one that caught my eye more than anything was a book that had a red cover. It was all covered in all like this mad red text, almost like the Matrix, and on the cover it had like the top half of what looked like Robin Hood. And I know the age old saying, never judge a book by its cover, but I was quite curious what it was, so I did pick it up. I read the blurb, it sounded really interesting. I was actually quite intrigued what it was. I saw the other ones around it. There was like some guy in like this soldier's gear, it was all like covered in blue, and then there was one next to it, it was just green, this gigantic reptile line. I was like, this seems quite interesting, this one. So I had a little look at what the books were, and I was trying to see which one came first, because they all had different subtitles, and eventually I did spot the first one, and that's the book that I ultimately chose, and I still have it to this day. Timeriders is a 9-part book series. It's written by Alex Scarrow. It started off in 2010 and ended in 2014. I believe there's rumours of a 10th book on the way, which I'm not really too sure about, because I think that it sort of ended in actually a really nice place, but I am quite curious to see where it is that the series goes. But I did become quite a big fan of this book series, and when I saw the title for this movie, Lyle Swann, Timerider, this was the first thing that went through my mind, and I was thinking like, well, hang on, is it, the name's exactly the same? Is there any sort of like connection or similarity or anything like that? And the answer is no. That was the initial reason why it is that I wanted to see this movie, just to see if there was any similarities whatsoever. I went in with the mindset of there probably won't be anything that connects them whatsoever, and I was completely right. The book series is all about a group of teenagers trying to prevent all this chaos from erupting across time, where they have to deal with the consequences of people who've been meddling with history, and they've got to sort of correct everything and ultimately sort of like push everything towards a certain end game. Whereas the movie is all about this guy who just goes into a military base and ends up getting transported back in time to the 1800s, and it's just turned into a western. The movie is so much more straightforward than the book series, and honestly, personal preference, I will stick with the books. But that doesn't mean that this film isn't worth talking about. But just before I do need to mention that I am going to go into a few spoilers for this movie, so if you haven't seen this movie and you don't want to know anything about it, then go away, go watch it and come back and see this review, because there's definitely a few things that I want to talk about. When it comes to the story for this movie, it is, as I said, it is so straightforward and very simple, almost to the point where it's a little bit too simple. This movie is about an hour 40 minutes long, but the problem is that the movie really does take its time to get going, which I do appreciate. I do like that it is paced out quite well. Everything is sort of introduced fairly naturally over time, but they don't really do too much with it, and it takes so long to actually get going that it can drag. And when it comes to the characters and the cast that they've chosen for this movie, from what I've seen online, it's like a lot of people who were in this were actually quite big names at the time, and I do think that everyone does give a pretty fine performance, and I genuinely do think that this is really well cast. Fred Ward, who very sadly passed away in 2022. He's not an actor that I'm very familiar with. I do kind of recognise him, but I'm not quite sure what from. And he's the lead character in this movie. He's the one sort of guiding everything forward. And I think that character-wise, I do think that he is a very likeable person. I do think he is pretty cool. You know, I like his costume that he's got. I am kind of confused when it is that his character is supposed to be from, because the helmet that he's got on is kind of advanced for the 1980s, but this is a sci-fi movie where time travel exists, and as likeable as he is, it is a bit of a problem that he's not really the deepest of characters. Like nobody really sort of gets properly fleshed out in this movie, and seeing as though he is the main character of this film, he doesn't really get an awful lot of time to be explored. And I've got to be honest, he does come across as a bit dim, because majority of this movie, he doesn't even seem like he's aware that he's gone back in time. Like, even though he lights up blue when he goes back in time, it takes him so long to stop asking questions, because up until Claire shows up and he's suddenly like, oh, she's pretty, all he's doing up until that point is just going, what's going on here? I don't understand. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And it's far too long. It is understandable given the circumstances, because if you're not aware of what's happened, you would be asking a lot of questions, but it wouldn't take you that long to not work out what's happened. But there is one thing that did unintentionally make me laugh a little bit, and it's the first person that he does come across when he actually goes back into the 1800s. And like, he's got his bike with him, which is called Machine throughout most of the movie, because nobody knows what a bike is at that point in time, and it's all lit up and everything, and he ends up going up to this old guy who's sitting around the campfire, and he scares him that much that it kills him. It's never brought up or addressed throughout the rest of the movie. And it gets a bit funnier for me, because I was convinced that he was going to sort of jump up or sort of like take a minute to get better, because you can see his arm moving, and it doesn't cross your mind that, oh, the guy's dead, apart from like the lingering shot of his face, but it's like you've just shown his arm moving. Anyway, so the Bright Spark decides when he goes to the village, he just goes ploughing into the place after causing this guy to die just because he scared him that much. That's not a bright idea. So I do definitely think that they could have done so much more with his character, because I feel like what they could have done is just have him maybe arrive in the village a lot earlier, and let him sort of spend more time there, and let him get used to where it is that he is, let him accept what's happened to him. And even though, you know, he's trying to think up of ways of getting back into the present, even though there's absolutely no possible way for him to do that, that maybe he sort of has to sort of accept that he's probably going to be stranded there for the rest of his life, so he sort of has to integrate himself with the way that they live. And I feel like that could have been a really interesting direction for them to have gone, with the ultimate twist being that the people who were orchestrating the time travel event do send somebody to go back and get him. So it would still ultimately end up in a similar place where the movie does end, but I feel like you would understand the character so much more, and he'd feel so much more fleshed out and developed. They do try and give him a little bit of backstory, because one of the things that he has with him when he travels back in time is he's got like this little necklace, and there is a backstory to it, there is a bit of history to it, and there's a scene where he's talking with Claire and he sort of explains the backstory behind it. I've got to be honest, the minute he sort of brings it up and the story that he's telling, I immediately went, I think I've sussed this out here. And I was spot on. It could genuinely be because I'm just used to these kind of stories, so I picked up on it a lot quicker than I probably normally would have. But because we don't find out that much about the character, this is like the only bit of detail that we really sort of properly have about him, it really sticks out. So I feel like having that time to really sort of flesh out and develop him a bit more, then maybe it might throw you off the scent a bit more, and you would be a bit more surprised by the time that the credits roll. There aren't a lot of particularly memorable characters in this movie, but there's a few that do sort of stand out for me, and one of them is Claire, played by Belinda Bauer. I actually do really like Claire in this movie. I think that she is actually a pretty good character. I don't think that she's fleshed out as much as I feel like she could be. As I said, pretty much most of the characters don't really get that much fleshed out, but she is like the only one who has like a proper backstory that we do get to explore a bit more, even though it is a full-on exposition dump when it is that she does bring it all up. But they do try and build up her character as much as possible, and I feel like the way that her performance is, the way that her character is, she does feel a lot more well-rounded than a lot of the other characters in this film. A lot of movies like this around the 80s would feel the need to basically just like turn her into a bit of a damsel in distress. And there is a moment where, yeah, she does get captured, she does get taken away by the bad guys. I also find it kind of funny that, once again, she is supposed to be a character that is meant to be unconscious at one scene in the movie when she's getting captured, and she's moving once again. It doesn't seem to happen beyond this point in the movie, but I did start thinking to myself, like, did they only do like one take per scene or something? Because I would have done that again, to be honest. But she is pretty cool. I do like that she does get involved in a lot of the action. I feel like Lyle, as I said, I feel like they really sort of could have built him up a bit more and have actually had him be a bit more of a proactive role within this, and actually have him sort of have a bit more of an impact on it all. Claire seems to be the proactive hero in most of these sequences, and I really do like that. They also get a pretty awesome sequence where Lyle and Claire are on the bike and they're racing away from these horses, and she's on the back facing all the horses coming towards them, and she's like got a gun ready for them and everything. That's actually quite a cool scene. She doesn't actually do any damage in it, but I feel like if they had embraced some of the more over the top moments of this movie, I genuinely feel like this could have been a great film. So yeah, for me, she's probably the best character in the movie. Now, the one actor that I do know from something else, and I can't remember what it is, that's how bad my memory is Ed Lauter, who plays Padre in this. Again, don't really know much about him, but I feel like the potential for his character, I feel, is a lot more than most of the others because of the potential conflicts that could have been built up with this character. You see him engaging with the bandits and the bad guys and sort of like potentially setting up Lyle and Claire and everyone. And I feel like if they actually done something with that, it could have been really interesting. There is a very brief moment when they do sort of bring it up once again towards the end of the film, but they barely do anything with it, and it almost feels like it could have just cut that out altogether and it wouldn't change a thing. So I feel like that could have been expanded so much more, and I feel like that could have really made this a lot more interesting. But then when it comes to the villains of this movie, we only really have like a few sort of like main villain characters, and the lead one is Peter Coyote, who plays Porter Reese, who's basically just like the regular sort of western baddie bandit kind of character, outlaw. Don't feel like they're absolutely fantastic villains, but I do think that they are quite fun. Like, the whole goal, their whole motivation is because they see what the bike is and they really want it for themselves. I think his two sidekicks are probably some of the funnier characters in this, because I feel like they sort of embrace some of the slightly more over the top moments of this film, and I do feel like that is something that they really could have embraced so much more in this film, because I feel like it would have made it so much more enjoyable. Because like during the scene where Lyle does go into the village, there is a scene where one of the bandits is like coming after him, and Claire jumps out and she like blasts him straight in the face. But for some reason he's on an angle when it actually happens, and next thing you know his nose gets like blown off. So he goes around with the rest of the movie, this gigantic bandage around his face, and it's just, that's not the direction that she was shooting. That's so nitpicky, just move on. But one thing I will say is that Porter Reese has one of the best death scenes I've seen in a long time, because it's like during the final fight sequence where they're basically trying to get away, and a helicopter has actually shown up to try and save Lyle, and he just starts like shooting up at it, and he catches the driver and the whole thing starts spinning around in midair, and the next you know it's just this shot of him just going like ah, as the propeller blades of the back just get closer and closer and closer, and then it cuts back to Claire for a second. You just hear this big zzz sound, and the next thing you know it cuts back to a pair of boots that are all bloodied. It's so ridiculous, but it is so fun. genuinely made me laugh when it happened. So this really does reinforce my point where I say that if this movie really did embrace those more over the top moments, if it had so much more of them, I think that this could have been so much more entertaining. I've said quite a few times in this review that I feel like this should have been so much more enjoyable, and that isn't me saying that I didn't enjoy it whatsoever, because I was actually quite surprised seeing what rating that this movie has on things like IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, because like this doesn't have a very good score whatsoever, but I don't necessarily think it's that bad, because there is actually quite a bit of potential for this. I don't feel like it's completely executed, and there are definitely a load of things that I would change, but overall I don't think that it's really as bad as it's often made out to be. Like, some of the reviews I've seen have said that this is absolutely horrible movie. It's like, it's not that bad. I've seen some horrific movies over the years, and believe me, it is nowhere near as bad as those. As I said, like, when it comes to the characters, there is potential there for them to have been expanded a lot more with a slightly longer movie, and I feel like with the movie overall, this movie does have a lot of potential, almost to the point where I know some people are going to disagree with me on this, especially if this is something that you did grow up with, but I feel like this is one of those few movies that I genuinely feel like if you had the right people involved, you could do a remake of this, or a reboot of, to some extent. And I feel like you could do so much more with it, and I genuinely think that it could be a genuinely great movie. The movie that we got is fine, but I do feel like they really could have gone so much more with it, and I feel like maybe just with the time that it was made, or the budget or something, I just feel like they could have pushed it so much more, and I genuinely feel like there is so much potential for it, and I really would like to see what somebody else could do with it. Because case in point, I don't feel like there's much of a mystery in this, and that's one of the reasons why I feel like the first hour does go on just a bit too long, because Lyle is just constantly asking questions to which we, the audience, already know the answer to. If the movie just focuses on Lyle's perspective, all he is doing is just testing out this bike system that he's got, goes out into the desert, and the next thing you know is a big flash, and then he's back in the 1800s. I feel like there is so much potential for a mystery surrounding this, and we'd be so much more invested in it if we didn't know the answers already. Because like the opening titles for this movie, there is a voiceover that is explaining everything that's going to happen with all the stuff with time travel. It feels a little unnecessary to me. And then all the biking sequences in this, like, even though like the stunt work is really good, and I do think that a lot of the biking sequences are actually pretty alright, I do feel like they could have been shot a bit more imaginatively here and there, because there are definitely a few shots where it just goes on a bit too long. And one of the shots that is like right at the beginning of the movie is a first person perspective of the bike like going through this desert, and it's long enough that I genuinely think that they could have just shifted the opening titles over that. You'd free up a couple extra minutes to sort of explore the characters or the story a bit more, and I feel like that might benefit it a bit more. But then on the flip side, I also feel like maybe rather than having Lyle have absolutely nothing to do with the experiment whatsoever, I feel like maybe he should have actually been the person that they were testing it on. You know, you can still have him be on the bike, and you can still have him do all the biking stuff, but maybe like, what if it is a bike that travels through time? That genuinely sounds really cool to me, and I'd actually like to see something like that. So as I said, just more imagination behind it. I genuinely feel like they could have done some really interesting things with this. As I said, like, yeah, there are definitely a few shots where it's all like first person, it goes on a bit too long, and like most of that sequence does go on just way too long, almost to the point where it's like, do you need to see all this stuff before the time travel stuff really sort of kicks off? Because it just takes too much time. Just trim it down, and you can use that time to explore the characters a bit more. But it is a bit funny that I am bringing up a lot of the shots in this movie and how the movie is actually filmed, because overall I do think it actually looks pretty alright. Because the location that they've chosen for, even though like it is very samey, there isn't really much variety to it, it does look quite nice. I do like that you do get to see as much of the place as possible, and I like that Lyle's costume is that really bright red colour, so whenever you see big wide shot on screen, you can always see him, you can always immediately spot where he is. Like there's a scene like where he's up on a mountain, and you know exactly where he is because he really does stand out. But that being said, this is one of those movies where I don't necessarily think that they really sort of took into account that the helmet is actually quite reflective. So there are a couple of shots where he's really quite close up in the camera, and you can see the camera and boom and everything, and I just feel like it could have done something to maybe sort of get around that. There are definitely a lot of little mistakes that do slip through the net in this one, but I don't feel like they're really enough to take you out of the movie. You just sort of accept it for what it is. But that being said, there is one scene that did confuse me enough that I did have to rewind the movie and rewatch that sequence. And it's during the final battle where Claire is taking on all the different baddies, and she's got like this satchel across her shoulder with all the bullets all stuck in it. There's a close-up of it where you see that like she is running out of bullets, so she takes it off and she throws it away, and there's a big up-close shot of the satchel being thrown away. But then in the next shot, she's got it back on, and again it's very prominent. I really don't know how they missed that, because there are definitely a few things that really are quite noticeable. As I said, like all the unconscious people that are still moving. I don't know how you couldn't spot things like that, because I feel like they are bigger mistakes than what would normally sort of slip through the net, like somebody just wearing jeans in the background of Indiana Jones or Pirates of the Caribbean. You wouldn't really notice things like that unless it was pointed out to you, which I've probably done now, sorry about that. But things like mistakes in this movie are so much more noticeable because they're so prominent on screen. So I just feel like they could have maybe done one or two more takes to just sort of iron it out a bit more. But one of the reasons why I feel like this movie probably didn't have as big of a budget as you might expect a movie like this to have is because of how much of it is just practical. Like everything is there on set with only like a few things here and there that need effects to enhance it, and that's really just like Lyle going through time. So I do appreciate that they do as much of it as they can for real, and pretty much everything that is happening on screen is real, including all of the stunt work, which is actually really good. When it comes to the music for this movie by Michael Nesmith, I actually quite like the soundtrack for this one. It's definitely a lot more up my street than a lot of soundtracks I have heard in recent years, because it's got like, it's a very 80s oriented soundtrack, but it's very synthy. There is a bit of a rock element to it and a bit of punk and things like that. Sort of shows like the different sort of elements of the character with the way that he is a biker, so they've got that sort of rock inspiration, all the synth music and everything. But then when it goes into the western times, the western music does sort of get amplified a little bit more, and it does suit a western movie of this kind. It doesn't sound like a straight up western soundtrack in the way that you'd hear from like The Good, Bad and the Ugly and things like that, but it does suit this movie, and I do think this is a very suitable soundtrack, and I do like it overall. The only drawback for me when it comes to the music is more just how it's sort of placed and used. I feel like they could have done something a bit more subtle with a few scenes, because this is kind of a thing where they probably have like recorded like a big like 15-minute track and then just sort of like chopped up little bits here and there, and then just like fade it in and fade it out where and when necessary. So it can sometimes feel a tiny bit random when it is used, but I think overall it is a very suitable soundtrack, and I do like how it does sound. Overall, I didn't really have really high expectations for this movie going into it, but I did find it fun, and honestly I would say that it was better than I expected it to be. But there are definitely a lot of problems with it. The story just doesn't feel like it's as developed as it really could be, and the same goes for a lot of the characters. I really feel like there is a lot of potential for this movie. I genuinely believe that this is one of those few films that would genuinely benefit from having a reboot of some kind. It does have a charm to it, and I do feel like there are people who will really enjoy this movie. I personally wouldn't say that this was a fantastic film by any means, but I did enjoy it for what it was. Yes, I would have liked to have seen so much more from it, like potentially a time bike, maybe even like a train heist or something like that. That could have been awesome with motorbikes. But it's a very straightforward story, and I do appreciate that they do try and keep it as simple as possible, but I do feel like they could have gone so much further with it. So I am definitely a bit conflicted when it comes to my rating for this movie, because as I said, I didn't think that this was a great film, but I'm more interested in the potential that this movie has, which is the reason why I wanted to give this movie a slightly higher rating. But purely based on the movie that I did watch and my experience with it, my rating for Timerider, The Adventure of Lyle Swann, is a 5 out of 10. As I said, it's not a great movie, and there definitely is so much more that they could have done with it, but I did enjoy it enough for what it was. But I really think that they could have just done so much more with it. And as I said, when comparing it to the Timerider books, like honestly there's no real contest for me. I will quite gladly pick these any day. I've also got to be honest, like I think they could make a really great film series. So Hollywood, if you're watching, Swann's book series that when I was actually reading, I have like a load of ideas in my head of what a movie could actually look like, to the point where I've actually got a really good idea for what it is that you could potentially do, plus a few casting choices as well. So like if I had the money and the resources, I would gladly do adaptations of them, but I don't know how possible that's going to be. I can dream. But yeah, Timerider the movie, The Adventure of Lyle Swann, the one Adventure of Lyle Swann, which I kept getting mixed up all the time. I kept calling it The Adventures of Lyle Swann, but no, it's just Adventure. It's an okay movie. It does have its fans. It does have a lot of people who do like it, and it is fine. I did enjoy it for what it was, as I said, and I feel like if this is something that you might enjoy, I would recommend having a look at it, but I wouldn't really say that this was for everybody. I feel like if you're more a casual moviegoer, I think you might enjoy it for what it is, but I don't know if this will be your thing. I think that's pretty much everything I've got to say for today's episode, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this content, please like, please subscribe, hit the notification button to keep up to date on everything that's going on this channel. If you've seen Timerider and you have any thoughts on it whatsoever, let me know down in the comments what you think about it. I know I did spend a little bit longer talking about the book series than I really sort of meant to in this one, but same goes out to you guys. If you've read the books, tell me what you think and which one's your favourite. Also, if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you'd like me to do in the future, whether it's film, TV, games, let me know down in the comments and I'll try and get around to them soon. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Rewind Reviews. See you guys.